Om Tat Sat. My humble prostrations to the all-pervading Brahman, to my worshipful Guruji, Swami Jyotirmayanandaji Maharaj, to sage Narada, and all sages and saints, and to each of you divine soul watching today's satsang. Commentaries by my worshipful Guruji, Swami Jyotirmayanandaji Maharaj, and narrated by myself, Swami Nikhilananda. So let's get started. It is Sutra number 30 from chapter 2, The Glory of Supreme Devotion. So let's get started. The sutra is Swayam Phal Rupat Iti Brahma Kumaraha. Again, Swayam Phal Rupat Iti Brahma Kumaraha. According to the son of Brahma, Brahma Kumara, which means Narada, sage Narada himself, devotion is the nature of its own fruit. Meaning, keeping in view the ideal of parabhakti. So whenever we are doing devotional things, chanting bhajans, kirtans, satsang, the idea is to get to that elevated state of parabhakti and not just stay at that level. So sage Narada holds devotion as the means as well as the end, declaring that bhakti does not depend upon knowledge or any other yogic discipline such as action or meditation. And we had covered that in one of the previous sutras example when we had talked about Dhruva, Prahlad, Shabri, etc. That devotion is a standalone path as well. It can directly take us if we only use bhakti, because there are many illiterate saints who don't even know how to sign their name, and yet they have touched God and they have felt Him. So neither reason nor emotion can be said to produce bhakti when spoken of it in its supreme form. So at that level, parabhakti is what we are talking about here, because parabhakti is not produced, it is the innermost reality of the soul. So it's very important to understand, although we are putting in our self-effort, although we are waking up early, we are doing all these things, all we are trying to do is reveal the essential nature of our soul. So reason and emotions may be considered as means to the development of secondary devotion. So those are all needed in the early stages. However, both are transcended in the supreme devotion. So as we go into parabhakti, we don't need these so-called ritualistic aspects. Although we can continue to do them, but we are not dependent on them. When secondary devotion removes the impurities of the heart, the primary devotion begins to shine forth in its glory. So in the early stages, it is required, it is essential in fact that we do those, otherwise our purification will not occur. So when primary devotion is perfected, then it becomes parabhakti or supreme devotion. So when the wind shatters the clouds, the sun shines forth. Yet it would be erroneous to say that the wind or the dispersal of the clouds was the cause that produced the sun in the sky. Sun is always there. So all we have to do is remove the clouds that are obstructing the sun. And that is why we do sadhana, tapasya, penance, or meditation, bhakti, all these things. But the sun does not depend on the clouds. Yet we are actually seeing the clouds because there is the sun. But yet the sun is not visible. And yet when the clouds move away, the sun shines forth in full glory. So too, supreme devotion is not dependent upon any means. It is a revelation. So figuratively, however, one may say that it is the rays of the sun which cause the wind, remove the clouds, and thus produce the revelations of the sun. So the sun becomes the means as well as the end, the fruit. So does that make sense? It is the sun we are trying to get to, and yet we have to go through all these disciplines to feel the rays, but the sun was always there. We didn't create anything new. Similarly, that parabhakti is always there within us, but we have to clarify and cleanse the soul within to feel that. So therefore, devotion is the means as well as the end. That is what Sage Narada is trying to guide us. So for example, milk always has butter in it, isn't it? It has the butter, but can you get the butter just by drinking the milk? Well, you are drinking it, but you're not producing butter separately. So what you have to do, you have to churn the milk. When you start churning the milk, it turns into butter. And then once it becomes butter, it can never be milk again. Much in the same way, we have all these things within us: bhakti, jnana, dhyana, emotions. But once we do the churning process, which is why which in the Srimad Bhagavatam we talk about the ocean churning, which is a whole chapter, chapter 8 in Bhagavatam, that has been devoted to this aspect only. But it is basically an inner journey where we have to put in the effort, and then we are able to extract the butter. Similarly, when we are able to disperse the clouds by our churning, we can see the sun, etc. So that is the meaning of this example here. So in simpler terms, a devotee worships God for increasing worshipfulness, prays to God for increasing prayerfulness, loves God for increasing love, and practices devotion in order to attain supreme devotion. So that is called para bhakti. Like when we pray for not the transient things of the world, ask for your bhakti to grow, ask for to be a better person, to get less angry, to get less frustrated in life, to be happy and peaceful. Those are all the things that will help, because they are selfless and they will make us a better individual as well as help us in our bhakti. So speaking of para bhakti, Saint Tulsidas, he was a very big saint who wrote the second version of the Ramayana. The first was by sage Valmiki, and the second one was by sage Tulsidasa. So he's saying here, so swatantra avalamba na anaya tehi adhin jnana vijnana. What that means is that supreme devotion is independent and therefore does not lean upon any path. Rather, wisdom and realization are subordinate to bhakti. This is what sage Tulsidas also says, and all of Srimad Bhagavatam is based upon devotion or bhakti. Even sage Vyasa, who had talked about the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutras, and all, he had done tremendous amount of intellectual work, was still not happy in the end, in his old age. And then sage Narada guided him to write Srimad Bhagavatam, or devotional scripts, which would give him peace and parabhakti, which he eventually did attain. And therefore we do Guru Purnima and we celebrate Vyas Puja to honor sage Vyasa. But even he and here Saint Tulsidas, they're saying the same thing, that we have to get bhakti, and then all these things come and assist us, intellect and meditation and so on. But to think that meditation is the only way and it will be okay without devotion, it is not practical. It's not possible, because like we said, ego keeps on inflating and keeps on bothering us, whereas in bhakti the fundamental requirement is that ego be defaced. We become inferior, we become humble, we become servants of God, we become his instruments. So that is the meaning. So to explain that supreme devotion is not produced as an effect or a fruit, but rather is discovered through sadhana. We had covered this in great detail in previous sutra also. Sage Narada gives us the example, which we will be covering in sutra number 21. But we basically say, when we say devotion is independent, we mean that bhakti, mukti jo hai, bhakti ki dasi hai. What means is that liberation is the maid servant of devotion. So if your devotion is intense, liberation will also come as a package deal through God's blessings. Whereas if we study those other paths, we may or may not get them, because if we are not guided properly, we may get entangled. So whereas if we follow the path of bhakti with devotion and love, and we reach the state of parabhakti, we automatically get liberation as a result. And the bliss is so intense that we keep on enjoying the journey. We don't wait for the end destination. The journey is as enjoyable as the end destination as well. So I hope you're finding this nectar to be of pure bliss. And our humble prostrations to our Guruji, Swami Jyotirmayananda Ji, Sage Narada, Swami Shivananda, Swami Shankaracharya, and Adi Shankaracharya Ji, all these wonderful sages, saints, and scriptures who have given us this nectar for us to implement in our daily lives while we are still healthy and we have a human body, and we can do something about it while we have the ability to do so. Human body, as we always say, is an incredible blessing, so it is up to us on how we use this tool. If we use it towards evolution, we can forever terminate the cycles of birth and death. This is Swami Nikhilananda. Om Tat Sat.